Hello there, people of the internet. So, I cannot remember what video it was on, and I cannot remember the specifics behind what was asked, but I do know that I got myself a comment, and it said, what about 762 by 54R? So, you know what? What about 762 by 54R? Let's go ahead and make a video talking about the cartridge. I've made plenty of videos talking about this cartridge, so if you want to go watch those are up on the channel. So, I got some 762 by 54R right here, along with a very common rifle that is going to be shooting them. So what is this cartridge? This is a cartridge that came about in 1891, and for the time period, it was quite revolutionary. It is a rimmed cartridge, and that was designed because firearms technology for that particular time period was just easier to headspace on a rim versus on the neck of a cartridge, so it was done for manufacturing simplicity. So we got a rimmed cartridge by today's standards that is absolutely an antiquated technology. Antiquated? Whatever word that is, you guys get what I'm trying to say. I think it's antiquated, but that's an antiquated technology, something that is used by basically yesterday's cartridges. There are plenty of really good rimmed cartridges out there, this being one of them for sure, but most of your modern cartridges are going to be a rimless cartridge, and most of them are going to be quite effective at feeding in self-loading rifles or firearms that are of that nature. I gotta watch my terminology here because YouTube does not like certain words. So typically with 762 by 54 rimmed, you're going to find two real main styles of cartridge. You're going to find, well, two main styles of bullet weight. You're going to find like a 150 grain, typically around a 147 grain, around that ballpark. Depends on manufacturer, depends on year of production, depends on where it is that you get it from, etc., etc. It's going to be around 147 to 150 grain for your lighter weight projectiles, and around 174 grain for your heavier stuff. Now, of course, there are going to be heavier projectiles out there that you can go out and get. For example, I have some hunting 762 by 54 rimmed that I think is made by Seller and Bellet, assuming that I'm not mispronouncing that name, you know, like the Dickens. And I think that those are 200 grain projectiles. They work extremely well, and I've taken quite a few pieces of game with them. But more often than not, you're going to find 147 or 174 grain projectiles, and that is what I have right here. This is actually military surplus stuff, and I can't quite remember what this is. I think it's Yugoslavian, if memory serves me correctly. But there's plenty of military surplus 762 by 54 rim down there. It is still used by many modern militaries, you know, in the world, all over the world. Many conflicts, they're still using this cartridge. Many situations where this is still being produced and surplused out, so you can absolutely still get 762 by 54 rim surplus on the market. However, there is plenty of commercial ammo as well. This is PPU, it's reloadable brass, and this is stuff that I consider to be like worth its weight in gold because it is extremely good ammo. If you're getting something like military surplus 762 by 54 rimmed, you're going to have issues with accuracy unless you get yourself like match grade like sniper ammo or something like that. Typically, you're going to have around 3 to 5 MOA accuracy with that military surplus ammo if you have yourself a half-decent rifle. I do know that with this PPU stuff, I've made videos about it on the channel before, shooting it, and I've gotten, I think the tightest group was 2 MOA out of this thing, but I'll have to double check that. I've done so many shooting videos with so many different calibers and so many different rifles. I do know that it is definitely more accurate than the military surplus stuff. So if we're talking a 147 grain projectile, which is mostly what you're going to find whenever it comes to 762 by 54 rimmed, that 147 grain is going to be traveling at about 2,800 feet per second from a full-length Mosin-Nagant barrel. That puts it on par with M2 Ball 30-06 and 762 NATO. So that's roughly the same caliber round. It's a 311 or 312 diameter projectile. Depends on your Mosin. I recommend slugging your barrels so you know exactly, you know, what it is that you're dealing with. Versus like the 762 NATO, which is a 308 diameter, but that diameter difference is so absolutely minimal. it would make basically zero difference in terms of effectiveness on your target. So essentially the same weight projectile, essentially the same style projectile. If we're talking military surplus stuff, it's going to be full metal jackets, and essentially the same speed. The effectiveness downrange is going to be on par with that of M2 ball 30-06 or 308 or 7.5 French, or I think 7.5 Swiss is also around in that ballpark. Basically, it's on par with all of your full power rifle 30 caliber cartridges. Now, most of your rifles that are going to fire this are going to be a Mosin Nagant variant if we're talking about things that civilians own here inside the United States. There are self-loading rifles that do take this cartridge, but those are overly expensive. I think that like a standard PSL nowadays is running about $2,000. That's a lot of money. For $2,000, you can get yourself quite the AR-10 setup in 308, which is a rimless cartridge, and it just has much better aftermarket support in comparison to the PSL. It's better customizable, and the ammunition is going to be more readily available and less expensive, especially as here in the United States we got certain bans and restrictions that are going to start taking place. So 9 times out of 10, whenever you got somebody utilizing the cartridge, it's going to be from a Mosin Nagant variant. There's really good Mosins out there, and there's really some piss-poor Mosins out there. A lot of your 7.62x54 rimmed made for a long time is corrosive, so a lot of these Mosins have shot-out barrels. I recommend getting one counterboard if you come across one that has a shot-out barrel. This particular one is an M44. It's got the bayonet. This is the carbine version. There are just like short carbine versions that do not have the bayonet. I think those are the M38. By a wide margin, the most common you're going to find is the 9130. That's what Russian made en masse during World War II. But you can also find the 1891 pattern along with various Finnish patterns, Chinese patterns, and I think a couple of other countries made them as well, but those are going to be your most common variants. All these rifles are going to be chambered in 7.62x54 rimmed unless there was some kind of conversion. I know China did conversions of Arisakas and turned them into 7.62x39 firing rifles. So maybe they did something similar with Mosins. I'm not entirely certain about that, but for the most part, they're going to be chambered in 7.62x54 rimmed, and this is going to be the cartridge and rifle combination that you're going to see with most people utilizing these rifles. That being said, the Mosin Nagant is a 5-shot bolt-action rifle. Definitely yesterday's technology. It's got an internal system that's, it's like a magazine cutoff in the sense that it keeps the rims of the cartridge separated, so you really prevent yourself from getting rim lock. Unless we're talking about something that's been sporterized and modernized, there's no good way to mount an optic on one of these things. So you basically just have your iron sights without cutting up and bubbaing the rifle. The actions on these tend to be quite sticky. A lot of that has to do with the Cosmoline and dried up grease that is in these rifles from long-term storage. They also tend to be quite shot out and not very accurate. These rifles were zeroed in with their bayonets attached. Why they did that, I have absolutely no idea. I do not like the idea of needing a bayonet in order to shoot my rifle accurately. So if you do have a Mosin that just does not shoot well at all, try throwing a bayonet on it and see if that helps. Because like I said, these were zeroed in for their for shooting with their bayonet attached. I definitely think that was a horrible, horrible idea, but that is the road that we've come across. So in conclusion, we got yesterday's generation fighting rifles, which are basically going to be the Mosin Nagant with some very rare exceptions, such as maybe semi-auto versions of light machine guns in 54 rimmed that the United States civilian population might have, or the $2,000 PSL, or maybe even the much more expensive Dragunov, which are definitely not very common to come across here inside the United States. Most people are going to be rocking the Mosin Nagant in 7.62x54 rimmed. The cartridge itself is rimmed. I've gotten rim lock in the Mosin plenty of times. Definitely a little bit of a challenge getting past the rim on these cartridges. Even though it does have that magazine cutoff system, it just does not work all that well or all that effectively. So rimmed cartridge, you do get rim lock. Most of your rifles, they're going to be pushing a century old at this point. Yeah, 7.62x54 rimmed in its heyday or with modern style rifles absolutely is something that could be considered for whatever situation it is that you have inside of your head. Most people are going to lean towards using these as a survival rifle versus a fighting rifle, in which case, absolutely go for it. These rifles used to be quite cheap, the ammunition used to be quite cheap, but that's no longer the case. Nowadays, you're looking at about $1 a round for new production and 60 cents a round for surplus stuff whenever it comes to the 7.62x54 rimmed. At those prices, I definitely recommend that you just get yourself some 308 ammunition. It's just a standard NATO cartridge. There's modern rifles that use 308, self-loading rifles. You don't got to worry about utilizing it in an old-school bolt-action rifle. There was a time period where this stuff was absolutely a viable cartridge here in the US, but we have gotten past that point, and now we are to the point to where we see people trying to hold on to it, and it's just absolutely not necessarily falling out of favor, but falling out of capabilities. We just don't have the technology updates with 7.62x54 rim that we do with other cartridges like 308. So that's my 2 cents on the subject. Thanks for watching. Appreciate your time. Like, subscribe, share. Description below has a link to all sorts of stuff. Go check it out. You guys go off and have yourself a fantastic day. I'll see you all in the next episode. Since I've done this. Bonnie and Clyde be damned. Poor man's Garen. Shame that bolt-action shotguns aren't more mainstream.